Saturday Night Live came back this weekend with a bang, and this time it was hosted by the ever-charming Miles Teller. This marks Teller's second time hosting the legendary sketch show. Fans might remember that he kicked off season 48 when Top Gun: Maverick Fever was at its peak. Now, he's back at Studio AH, promoting his upcoming romantic comedy fantasy film Eternity, which hits theaters on November 26. Alongside him, musical powerhouse Brandi Carlile returned for her fourth appearance on the show, Jode. With a packed lineup of sketches, music, and familiar faces, this episode had the perfect balance of humor, heart, and chaos that only SNL can deliver. This week's recap was joined by former cast member Aristotle Athari, who has been busy himself with his new film, The French Italian, now streaming on Apple and Amazon. Athari reflected on his time filming, joking that the cast laughed through most takes, making it a miracle the movie was ever finished. He also offered great commentary throughout the episode, especially about Teller's natural comedic timing. As the night kicked off, there were reports of shorter standby lines outside 30 Rock than usual. That could have meant a quieter audience, but thankfully, the crowd was lively enough to keep up with the jokes flying across the stage. The show began with a cold open that spoofed a fictional NYC mayoral debate hosted by Spectrum NY1. Miles Teller stepped into the shoes of disgraced former Governor Andrew Cuomo, while Ramy Youssef and Shane Gillis appeared as Zoran Mamdani and Curtis Sliwa, respectively. Kenan Thompson held the sketch together as the least famous person impersonated in SNL history. The bit poked fun at local politics, TikTok politicians, and the eternal chaos of New York elections. The sketch got an unexpected boost when James Austin Johnson's Donald Trump made a dramatic appearance, breaking into a musical number straight out of The Phantom of the Opera. The sketch ended on that hilarious high note, proof that SNL's Trump parodies are still unbeatable. Then came Miles Teller's monologue, which was surprisingly heartfelt. He danced his way onstage and reminisced about dressing up as SNL characters like the night at the Roxbury Guys when he was younger. Teller also talked about moving around a lot as a kid and said that performing on SNL feels like being home. He shared a very personal story about losing his home earlier this year in the Pacific Palisades fire. Despite the tragedy, he used humor to lighten the moment, joking about fire exits around the studio. Aristotle Athari noted how Teller's delivery revealed his natural comedic instincts, saying, "You can see the timing behind his eyes." The first big sketch of the night, Hungover Halloween Game Show, featured Kenan Thompson as host Gay Fope, welcoming 3 contestants, Teller, Ben Marshall, and Veronica Slowakowska, who were hilariously struggling with hangovers. The game revolved around them trying to recall what they did the night before, and each wrong answer led to a ridiculous punishment. The energy was high, and Kenan dominated the scene. It's fair to say this was one of his strongest nights of the season so far. Next came White House Makeover, a spoof on the Property Brothers, with Teller playing one of the twin hosts as they renovate the East Wing. James Austin Johnson reprised his role as Trump, delivering another fantastic, oddly depressing performance. Teller nailed the cheesy home renovation vibe perfectly, and Chloe Fineman took over as Melania Trump, a role previously handled by Cecily Strong. This sketch stood out for its sharp writing and hilarious mix of political and pop culture references. The next sketch, Hockey PSA, took aim at professional sports promos. Teller played a member of the Nashville Predators, giving an awkwardly worded speech about his team's community outreach. The humor came from Teller's complete inability to realize how creepy his lines sounded, especially when talking about rubbing off on kids. The directors, played by Andrew Dismukes and Ashley Padilla, were equally funny as they tried to manage the cringe-worthy chaos. Then came Missing Wives docuseries, a parody of Netflix true crime shows. The plot revolved around three clueless husbands convinced their wives were missing, only to find out their wives had just gone shopping or stepped into another room. The humor came from how overdramatic the documentary style was compared to the ordinary reasons behind the wives' absences. Sarah Sherman's deadpan delivery made it even better. After that, Newsroom took viewers inside a renovated studio where Daphne Dodd, Chloe Fineman, and economist P.L. Henry Kennan Thompson tried to discuss serious world events. The chaos unfolded as background workers repeatedly crashed into things and caused mayhem. Mikey Day walking into the wall became an instant highlight, and the sketch as balance of visual comedy and deadpan news delivery was classic SNL. Then it was time for Brandi Carlile's first performance of the night, Church and State. The song carried a strong political message with a passionate delivery reminiscent of Neil Young's protest era. Carlile shared in interviews that she wrote it on Election Day last year as a primal cry for self-preservation. Her raw, emotional performance filled the studio with energy and sincerity, setting a perfect contrast to the evening's comedy. The Weekend Update segment followed, with Colin Jost and Michael She back at the desk. Jost joked about Halloween at the White House and the bizarre antics of Donald Trump, while she tackled current issues with his usual sharp wit. He even referenced his earlier Instagram post about SNAP benefits and how government cuts affect real people, blending humor with heartfelt commentary. Bowen Yang made a triumphant return as George Santos, the famously scandal-ridden congressman. His exaggerated version of Santos bragging about stealing jewels from the Louvre and living with Diddy was outrageous and had the audience roaring. The sketch also cleverly tied in real-world news, referencing the Dodgers' recent World Series win. Padilla and Dismukes later returned as a couple discussing the government shutdown while being unable to stop flirting. Their chemistry was hilarious, and it was a fun callback to their earlier sketch together. Next, Murder Press Briefing saw Teller play a detective trying to stay professional during a chaotic press conference about a serial killer known as the Steak Knife Slasher. Reporters kept derailing the event, especially one played by Dismukes, who turned the briefing into a bizarre self-promotion moment for his failed graphic novel, Girl. Teller's increasingly frustrated detective reactions made this sketch one of the night's underrated gems. Brandi Carlile returned to perform human a soulful and emotional song co-produced by Aaron Dessner and Justin Vernon. The performance was beautifully done, proving again why Carlile is considered one of the best live performers of her generation. The audience clearly felt every word, and it gave the night a moving, introspective pause before heading back into comedy. The final sketch of the evening, an Italian restaurant date, took us to what was described as the best Italian restaurant in Nebraska. Of Teller and Marcelo Hernandez played over the top waiters who couldn't stop making ridiculous pasta puns and touching every customer's shoulders. The skit's broad humor and silly energy felt like a throwback to classic SNL sketches like Pepper Boy. Even though it was all over the place, Teller gave it his all, and the audience responded warmly. The episode wrapped up with Teller thanking the cast, crew, and the audience, giving a special shout-out to Brandi Carlile and Aristotle Athari. It was clear Teller was having the time of his life back at Studio 8H. His second hosting gig proved that he's not just a serious actor, he's got the comedic chops and charisma that make him a natural fit for live comedy. Former cast member Athari reflected on how SNL shaped his career, saying that he still finds himself using lessons learned from the show while working on new projects. He mentioned that writing daily, something ingrained from his time on SNL, remains one of the most valuable habits he's carried forward. He also teased his next project, Good Night Baby, which he's co-writing with the Eric Andre Show's Dan Curry. Overall, this week's episode of SNL was a solid return to form. A mix of political humor, goofy sketches, and musical excellence. Teller's heartfelt monologue, combined with his comedic energy throughout the night, made the episode feel both personal and funny. Brandi Carlile's performances were nothing short of phenomenal, balancing the comedy with emotional depth. While not every sketch was a home run, the chemistry between the cast and the returning guest host kept things fun and engaging. From Trump jokes to pasta puns, from missing wives to hungover contestants, the episode had something for everyone. It was the kind of SNL night that reminded fans why the show still matters. 51 seasons later, it can still make us laugh, think, and maybe even tear up a little. And that's a wrap for this week's SNL recap. With Teller's easy charm, Brandi Carlile's powerhouse performances, and a lineup of strong sketches, this episode was a reminder that when SNL finds its rhythm, it can still deliver gold. Whether you tuned in for the political jabs or just for the laughs, this one was definitely worth staying up for.